A very good day to all my panels, Prof. Siwarao, Dr. Sanusi, and Prof. Nur Izan. So today I'd like to do a presentation on my final year project, which is cooling rate effect on the strength of bobbin friction stir welding joint. So the outline for this presentation is introduction, followed by methodology, result and discussion, and then conclusion. The problem statement that have been found is bobbin friction stir welding has a higher heat cost compared to the friction stir welding. Besides, bobbin friction stir welding also produce a bigger grains compared to the conventional friction stir welding. The microstructures are also not refined and inefficient cooling rate and cooling method are also found. So the objective for this research is to evaluate the behavior of weld joint at different cooling medium. And the second objective is to propose the best cooling medium for the welded joint of bobbin friction stir welding. The methodology starts with literature review and then the sample preparation where there is a lot collections of data based on journal, then also about more about cooling effect on the weld joint. And then it is proceed to the critical literature review where three factors of data were collected, which is cooling type, materials and method. So for cooling type, it have been constant throughout all the data collections, which is all the data, tabulated data is all used with tap water, which means that the experiment is using tap water as a coolant. And then the second factor is material. Different aluminium alloy materials were chosen and tabulated to get various results. For an example, 6000 series, 7000 series, and 2000 series of aluminium were chosen. The third factor is the method. Four types of cooling method were tabulated, which is underwater friction stir welding, nitrogen cooling, which is using friction stir welding, natural cooling, and bobbin friction stir welding for minimum quantity lubricant, which is also another cooling method. And then to the correlation. Okay, in correlation, it's to find the connections, the relationship between the cooling methods and the effect of weld joint strength. And as for the prediction, that is the estimation of factors that affecting the objectives are being analyzed. Last but not least, the summary. The conclusion of cooling method that has four types of cooling rate on the weld joint will be discussed. So this is the result findings from the research. Okay, so this is the bar graph, okay, of tensile strength after cooling for four different cooling medium. So based on the data collections, the underwater welding was recorded with the highest tensile strength, which is 341 megapascal, and then followed by the natural cooling, which is for 312 megapascal, nitrogen cooling for 287.3 megapascal, and followed by the minimum quantity lubricant for 178 megapascal. So this is the tabulated data on the cooling type, the materials of workpiece, the tensile strength before the cooling process, and then after cooling process. So there are few factors that might influence the development of the strong weld joint, such as the materials of workpiece used and the thickness of workpiece itself. For example, here 7000 series of aluminium is known for the highest strength in the aluminium alloys. But the tensile strength here for AA7039 is lower than 2000 series after application of cooling process. So this can be concluded that actually the thickness of materials also contribute to the strength of the weld joint. Next, the result of hardness, which is findings from the research as well, for these 4 different types of cooling medium. So based on the data collected, the cooling method that have been recorded with the highest hardness is the nitrogen cooling with 107.92 hardness, followed by the neutral cooling, underwater cooling, and minimum quantity lubricant at 97 HV, 88 HV, and 80 HV. So high heat can cause the grain of materials to grow, where the hardness of workpiece also can be reduced. Hardness value is very important in weld joint because the higher the hardness value, the better the weld joint to resist the deformation. So thickness plays an important role because heat can be dissipated on top of a weld surface and did not reach the bottom. So if the workpiece has a small thickness, the heat can be dissipated overall, which producing a less hardness value. Not only thickness, but materials of workpiece also plays an important role to determine the strength of weld joint and hardness. So next is elongation result, which is finding from the research as well. So elongation is the mechanical properties of a metal that indicates a degree of a metal may be bent, stretched, um, or compressed before it gets ruptured. So due to the excessive heat, the grains in the workpiece can become coarse and the oxidation of metal occurs, which it can be result in low percentage of elongation. So based on the table, the highest elongation percent is 11.93 in natural cooling method, followed by nitrogen cooling, and then MQL, minimum quantity lubricant, and then underwater friction stir welding cooling method, which is at 9.7%, 8.7%, and 7.6%. From here, what I can conclude is the elongation may be influenced by the cutting speed or the cooling method and the properties of materials itself. So the quality of weld joint is actually not determined only by the cooling methods, but with a proper setup of parameter. And then the strength of weld joint in bobbin friction stir welding can be improved by applying a proper cooling method and the parameter itself. And based on the data findings, the best cooling method that I can conclude is for bobbin friction stir welding is the underwater welding to improve the strength of weld joint. This is because the heat absorption effect of water can be fully utilized by immersing the whole workpiece into the water environment during welding. So a large heat dissipated not only from the top surface but also from the bottom surface as well, because it's all covered, immersing the whole workpiece in the water. So from here, the properties of weak weld joint can be improved and effective strengthening of tensile strength can be seen with underwater joint. So for the recommendation, I like to do recommend for the further studies that can be done by conducting the minimum quantity lubricant method for a different volume of liquid as a coolant, which initially was my supposed to be my parameter to complete the project, but due to the pandemic, so I would like to recommend this idea on for upcoming further studies. And then research also can be done more detailed by conducting all the cooling method with the same cutting speed and feed rate to have a more accurate results. And then research can be done by conducting experiments for all the cooling methods as well with the same workpiece and the same thickness to have more accurate result as well. So that's all from me. Thank you.